Podcast Evolved, your home for Halo.
Oh, hello. Greetings, Reclaimers. I am 343 Guilty Spark, monitor of Podcast Evolved. Protocol dictates that you must listen. Come, we have a wealth of knowledge to share with you, and you don't want to make my blue eye red. Do you, Reclaimers?
Welcome, Spartans, to Podcast Evolve, your home for Halo. I'm your host today, David, and with me is Oren.
Hey, everybody.
That's right, he's back. And Krista Brown.
Hey! I'm excited for this one.
Oh, yes, she is. So this week's character, Dossier, is focused on 343 Guilty Spark. That lovely, lovely fellow. So we got lots to talk about. But before we get started, let's do some stuffs. If you're new to the show, welcome. Podcast Evolved is a host to a variety of shows. This is our main show where we talk about the Halo news, lore, and to you, the listeners. Our other shows are Mission Debrief, Halo Book Club, and Builds of Blocks. We also have a Halo Headlines kind of series that's kind of like a mini-series ongoing with kind of breakout news and stuff like that. You can learn about all of them on our awesome website, halopodcastevolved.com. If you're already a fan of the show, we ask you to rate us and leave a review. Those kind of things really do help us. Give us some feedback, what's working, what's not working, and we aim to improve all the time. If you guys are interested in the Halo Championship Series or a fan of esports in general, we actually have a partnership, so we'd like you to reach out to HCS Pro Talk with Josh and Will. So we have a little bit of a collab going back and forward with these guys, so they cover that news beat, so we don't have to. You can find them on any of your podcast feeds. We would also like to take this moment to thank all our patrons. That's right, we got a Patreon. It's pretty damn cool. Thank you guys so much. Like every episode, it's just crazy. You guys are there. You've done it all. The last 2 years have been pretty incredible. And you know, just having you guys to support us is pretty amazing. So thank you all so much. If you think you'd like to be one, patrons get a variety of exclusive rewards, early episodes, the usual kind of stuff, bits of swag that we have for our own merch over there, access to our own soundtrack, which is still crazy to say. There's 18 tracks. It was made by Trey Anderson, and it's pretty incredible. You probably heard it. It's where we do all our intros and outros now is from our own music. It's pretty cool. So head over to patreon.com/Halo Podcast Evolved if you'd like to learn more. And finally, we would like our listeners to support, should you so choose, Audible. Over there, you can get everything. Pretty much all the Halo novels are up there. There's thousands of other books. Crazy amounts of content is over there. And if you want a free trial, we got one for you. It's called audibletrial.com/podcast evolved. That gives us a little bump and we'll give you a free trial. So, now that we've done all the stuffs, we are ready to talk some Halos. So I will ask, Krista, what are we talking about today?
Well, today we're talking about something that I enjoy very immensely. We're talking about the man, the myth, the monitor, 343 Guilty Spark.
That was pretty good. You could have went the
Chakas.
yeah. Oh man,
That was pretty good.
that was good.
Yeah, that wasn't scripted at all. I'm just a genius, you know. So this is episode 4 of our character dossier series. Of course, we're gonna go over Guilty Spark and all of his other aliases from over the years.
Spoilers.
Of course, there are going to be numerous spoilers from the Forerunner trilogy, original Halo trilogy, and the Ryan Forge saga, which include Renegades and Point of Light. If you care about spoilers from any of those areas of Halo, I highly suggest you go and consume that media as quickly as possible, because it is an amazing story that is being told. So, as we know, Guilty Spark is the blue flying bulb that shows up halfway through Halo CE and torments you all the way through the end of Halo 3. But that is not where his story ends. It actually expands surprisingly way beyond Halo 3. Like, when I never expected this character to go beyond Halo 3, honestly, with the way it ended, but
Yeah.
they've surprisingly integrated him into the lore so very well. He's probably one of the most interesting characters in all of Halo lore.
Definitely. He's been like randomly more interesting because like he was obviously interesting in the first game, and like as like a little AI that kind of like an antagonist for you, like as with a voice, like a character you could interact with, not just like the float where like nothing really to interact with.
He was also kind of exposition man, because
yeah, he told you a lot of stuff.
Which was... he's throwing good facts around every so often.
Exactly, yeah. He was great for that, and then obviously his character got kind of like what he was changed over the course of the games, and then like the extended lore kind of like took this character and just went crazy with him.
And it's amazing because almost every book that has included 343 Guilty Spark, he's always been a reveal, right?
Yeah.
In the original Forerunner trilogy, it's a reveal of who Guilty Spark is. And then, of course, in Renegades, it's a reveal of who, shows up. So I really like it. It's always a surprise when he pops up. It's always like, what? Who? You're here now? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great.
He also just has such a unique, life. Because there's so much content and kind of the centuries and millennia that he's been through, that he has this unique perspective, and it just makes him a more interesting character to learn about.
Yeah, so I guess let's jump right into the Forerunner trilogy. So, as you may or may not know, 343 Guilty Spark did not start off as an Ancilla or a Forerunner monitor. He was originally a human named Chakas, who was born on Ere de Tyrene towards the end of the Forerunner Flood War. At that point, the humanity had been kind of de-evolutioned by the Forerunners, so it was a very primitive society. Not quite cavemen, kind of in between the caveman period and the agriculture period, where we actually had some kind of civilization going on, was kind of the vibe you get from the original Forerunner trilogy when they're talking about humanity. So humanity's not in a great place right now. They obviously think that, the Forerunners are these crazy, beings that aren't quite gods, but are kind of assholes at the same time. Chakas had a family, he had a friend named Riser, and of course, he was always looking for ways to make more money to benefit his family. Of course, he at one point he kind of wanted to rob a Forerunner and take all their treasures, but that didn't actually end up panning out for him very well.
That's what I would have done.
Yeah, it takes balls though. It takes balls to do something like that.
But it's very evident very quickly in the Forerunner trilogy that pretty much everything is clandestine that is happening. So Chakas has a Guiache, and of course the Forerunner that eventually becomes the Isodidact, Bornstellar, also has a Guiache. So Bornstellar arrives on Ere de Tyrene with Chakas, and Bornstellar's like, I'm looking for treasure. And Chakas is like, wow, I am also looking for treasure. And then Riser, Chakas' friend, is like, I too am looking for treasure. So they go off treasure hunting. And they, when kids go out treasure hunting, it's pretty fun. You find something cool. They found something cool. They found the UR Didact. Just hanging out.
Kind of like the Goonies. Just think of it like that.
Yeah, they was very Goonies. So they found the UR Didact, Bornstellar, Chakas, and Riser, and that's kind of where things take a turn. So
Sure
the UR Didact get everyone into a whole lot of shit. Just a whole lot. There's a lot of Forerunner politics going on. The Flood is, of course, being the Flood, and the entire government of the Forerunners are trying to figure out exactly how to deal with everything. At this point, the senescent Halo array has been built by the Master Builder, and, throughout their adventures, they end up going to Installation 07. And that is the start of the second Forerunner book, which is Primordium, which is basically, Chakas's magical adventure around Installation 07, and that's where a lot of his, history comes from, really, and kind of one of the reasons why Installation 07 is very important, because the Forerunners, the Flood, and humanity was present on this ring. So humanity was almost kind of like a zoo kind of thing. There was a bunch of different animals and stuff like that contained on Installation 07, but Chakas is obviously trying to find a way to get back to Bornstellar, who is no longer with them, and Riser is with Chakas at this time. And they end up going on a magical adventure and end up facing the Primordial, who is a precursor and kind of floody as well. And of course, you're not gonna go out of facing the Primordial a very healthy person. So the Primordial basically mortally wounded and broke down Chakas mentally. At this point, Bornstellar has been made into the Isodidact, so as an act of mercy for his old friend, he saves Chakas by transferring his being into the shell of a monitor and giving him additional personality strings. So, at this point, Chakas is no longer human. He is now a monitor called Chakas. Monitor Chakas was assigned to serve as a record keeper to the librarian. And then, of course, when the rings are eventually fired, Bornstellar decides to reassign Chakas and give him the name 343 Guilty Spark and assign him to Installation 04. Now, one of the most important things the Forerunners did was compartmentalize all of their information so that if the Flood were to overwhelm or take over one installation, the Flood would not have access to all of the Forerunners' knowledge. And this also, happened to the monitors as well. So, upon firing the installation, large portions of Guilty Spark's memory were suppressed, compartmentalized as a precaution against the Flood and the Logic Plague. So, at this point, Chakas really isn't Chakas anymore. A lot of his personality is diminished, a lot of his memories are completely gone. They're still within his mind, but they are no longer accessible to him. And of course, the most prominent personality strings are the ones to, make sure the installation's working, taking care of it, all of the different protocols and stuff that needed to be in place for Installation 04. So, of course, this completely broken human being, who is now not a human being anymore and has probably more coding in him than actual human memory, gets to hang out on this installation by himself for 101,217 years. And
nice.
It's not gonna put you to a healthy state mentally with all that stuff going on. So,
oh man, think how many video games I could get done in that time. Just leave me alone.
So they didn't even leave him with video games.
101,000 years. And also, as a monitor, I'm sure he can kind of play those games and beat them more quickly.
He can't even do that. Remember, the domain is inaccessible. There's no internet for this guy.
That's perfect. Why do you need the internet, man? Single player games.
There's no video games. There's no internet. How is he supposed to download his games?
There's no single player games. Online only. This is the future, David. So are the only interaction that Guilty Spark has is like the other monitors, which still isn't that frequent over 100,000 years, but I mean that's really the only other entity that he's ever spoken to in this long span of time.
Yeah, so unfortunately, some of the other installations have other monitors located on them. Installation 04 and all of the Neoteric Array, I think 1 through 6 do not include this. So there's one monitor per ring. The monitors do have check-ins every whatever cycles or whatever. So, of course, that didn't end up panning out, especially towards the end of his especially towards the end of this stay. The only other interaction he really had was, if you remember in the Halo CE terminal, there is a ship that crashes on Installation 04, but protocol dictated him to not approach the vessel at all, and to let whatever beings are inside to either show themselves or not show themselves. Unfortunately, they did not show themselves, and Guilty Spark's protocol told him not to make any kind of contact. So, after that, Guilty Spark said, I'm gonna ignore that particular protocol, so next time I can actually talk to someone, and that's one of the reasons why Guilty Spark makes contact with the Pillar of Autumn pretty much once it enters the system. So
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So he's not doing too well at this point. He's not having fun. He's not. Of course, we've seen the Halo CE terminals, which kind of tell us what happened during this time, and Guilty Spark pretty much just thinks about, I wish I had a friend. You know what, I'm bored. I'm just gonna, eject parts of the Halo for fun. So he just kind of does stuff like that to keep himself entertained. He also can shut himself down for long periods of time, but he does have to be active to some regard in order to make sure the installation is properly monitored. So, Born Stellar really did a huge act of mercy in saving Chakas when he did.
100%.
Oh, man. It was really more of a curse for poor Guilty Spark. So, we all know the events of Halo 1. The Pillar of Autumn crashes on Installation 04. Guilty Spark contacts them a little bit, but kind of stays out of the picture until the Flood is released, in which Guilty Spark makes contact with the Master Chief. They go get the activation index for the installation, which is when Cortana's like, oh, this is what the ring really does, and Guilty Spark's like, what the fuck, you didn't know that? And then Chief's like, oh shit, I'm gonna destroy the ring. And then Guilty Spark's like, oh hell no! And then they of course have kind of a back and forth game throughout the rest of the game until Chief ends up blowing up the ring, and then Guilty Spark is really sad. So, being really sad, Guilty Spark escapes the ring and goes on a magical adventure and meets the heretic leader, Sese Rafume. If you remember, this goes into the terminals in Halo 2.
Well, he wasn't a heretic until he met this guy. So.
It's true, but it's kind of how you define this. I mean,
that's a good point.
It is. That is very true. So
that's funny.
Guilty Spark, in the neighboring gas giant has a huge Forerunner installation on it that is, I think, a fuel station.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Which is where a bunch of Covenant are stationed in order to, benefit from the fuel that is being created on the gas giant.
I think they're harvesting it to, do their thing.
Yeah, well, the Covenant have to have, because they use so much plasma, they have to have all of these different, recharging stations throughout the galaxy, and so I think that's kind of why they posted up there. Just using the already available technology in order to benefit themselves. So, Guilty Spark shows up, and the Sese Rafume is like, what the fuck, who the hell are you? And he's like, I'm the monitor of Installation 04, my name is 343 Guilty Spark. And he's like, oh, you're an oracle. Guilty Spark's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Sese Rafume is like, oh yeah, the Great Journey and shit. And Guilty Spark's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And Sese's like, we're gonna activate the rings, and we're gonna, ascend and be gods. Guilty Spark's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so, Guilty Spark pretty much gives Sese Rafume the truth that the prophets did not want to tell the elites, that the Halos kill everyone, the Forerunners were not gods, they were just highly advanced, this and that. So that creates, of course, the entire huge heretic plot that is going on in Halo 2. So at the start of Halo 2, Guilty Spark is hanging out with the heretics, and of course, you as Arbiter just see him flying around, you're like, what the fuck are you doing here? Guilty Spark's like, hi, I'm the monitor of Installation 04.
Let's be friends.
Yeah, and let's be friends. And then Tartarus, of course, takes Guilty Spark pretty much away right then and there, because the prophets have kind of figured out that the Oracle talking to the elites has caused them to be heretics and betray the Covenant, because, of course, the Monitor is going to tell them the truth. So, that having happened, for a quick stunt, Guilty Spark is with the Hierarchs, and eventually, do they just let him go?
I'm trying to think.
Or does Arbiter break him out?
I don't know.
Did you just leave?
They, I think he travels with everybody up until they get to the Ark.
I'm talking about when Truth has the Monitor captured. Truth has him captured for a quick stint, and then by the end of Halo 2...
Oh, well, no, yeah, here's what happens. Well, because he's with Tartarus, and then when the Arbiter kills Tartarus...
he just
you have Johnson and Miranda there, and
go.
they deactivate the ring, and then that's when Spark says, oh, everything's going into standby mode, and we have to go to the Ark. So by that point, Guilty Spark is quote-unquote with us, with Johnson and Miranda.
Okay, so yes, so Truth takes Guilty Spark. Guilty Spark helps them walk through how to unlock the installation. So at the very end of the game, when you're trying to stop Tartarus from activating the installation, the Monitor is there, and of course Tartarus just fucking chucks the Monitor at them at one point. It's just a fucking mess. Oh, it's amazing. And of course, like, the monitor, like, Johnson hanging on to Guilty Spark and flying him over and shit like that. It's
That
just
was
so
cool.
funny.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
It's really funny. So, Guilty Spark is, quote-unquote, on our side. He wants to get to the Ark. He wants to stop the Covenant, because, of course, like, if there's no need to activate the ring, of course Guilty Spark's like, well, why the fuck are you doing that? That's kind of dumb. So, post Halo 2, Guilty Spark is hanging out with Ratas Vadum, or the Shipmaster, at Installation 05 to oversee containment, and then, of course, when an infected ship escapes containment and lands on Earth, they give chase. So, if you remember in Halo 3, after that first floody mission, Guilty Spark just randomly shows up and is like, "Oh, hi, I'm back." John's like, "The fuck you doing here?"
Yeah.
So, everything's going pretty well up until the very last moments of Halo 3 when Installation 04 is reborn. Guilty Spark's super happy because now all of his protocols can be intact again and he has his ring to take care of. And John is just like, we have to fire this now, and it might explode the whole ring, and Guilty Spark's like, no. And then, of course, we kill Guilty Spark at that point. So we laser the fuck out of Guilty Spark for killing Johnson, RIP. And Guilty Spark explodes, and we escape the ring, and that is kind of the last we really hear from 343 Guilty Spark. Until we go back to the Forerunner trilogy. Oh my god.
Very
Guilty
briefly.
Spark
Yeah,
has...
this is the end of, this is when the Rubicon, is that what they...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, so, post Halo 3, I don't know how his carapace survives the entire explosion and firing of Installation 04, but it does.
Well, it's not designed to, like, wipe out mechanical
That's true, but the
stuff.
entire ring, like, explodes itself.
That's true.
Yeah, and it went to kill the Flood, and I think they also, their humanity's intention was to also kind of damage the Foundry so they couldn't rebuild a ring, since the ring was in there, even though the monitors ended up doing that anyway. But yeah, it is kind of a little question mark there. But
I mean, the ring itself, like, the pulse from the ring wouldn't kill him, but there's so many subsequent stuff that he's heavily damaged, but he does end up surviving.
Yeah, it's just more than just the pulse, I think, is activated because the ring isn't completely built.
Fair enough.
I think the pulse goes out, but then the ring in and itself just
explodes
it just falls because apart. it doesn't do the right thing. So that's why we had to do the whole Warthog run at the end and jump into the Forward Unto Dawn and fly away.
Yeah. The ring is not completely built, and if the ring was completely built, Guilty Spark would have had no problem just firing the ring. But unfortunately, because after firing the ring itself destabilized and didn't work anymore, Guilty Spark was not okay with that.
Yeah.
So, now we move on to the end of Primordium. So, post Halo 3, the damaged armature was discovered by the crew of the Rubicon, as they were just kind of searching through the wreckage of Installation 08 and what was going on with the Ark. Guilty Spark, who was extremely damaged, didn't really even know who he was at times, kind of told them his story. So at this point, he was so damaged that all the different firewalls and compartmentalization that had been keeping him from remembering everything have kind of been released. And he remembers some of it, so he's basically able to retell the entire Forerunner trilogy to them, and that becomes known as the Born-Stellar relation within the canon of Halo, which is super cool.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
So, of course, after telling him his story, Guilty Spark kind of realizes something. He realizes that the Librarian may still have something for him to do, because at this point, Guilty Spark knows that pretty much everything that's happened up until now has been a guillotine that the Librarian has given him. So at this point, he takes control of the Rubicon and goes looking for the Librarian. So he heads to Etran Harbridge. Unfortunately, he never gets to Etran Harbridge because the Rubicon's crew decide to retaliate. The Rubicon crashes, all hands are killed except for Guilty Spark, who is able to craft an armature body for himself and just kind of do that. He just kind of does that. So at this point, Guilty Spark is more of an AI than a monitor at this point.
Yeah, he's completely kind of broken free of those shackles.
Yes, he has. He's kind of rebuilt himself. He knows who he is. He knows he was Chakas. He knows he was Guilty Spark. And now he's honestly pretty much a different character at this point. So this would be the third kind of, I guess, version of this character. He just calls him Spark now. Yeah, he's almost reincarnated.
I guess
himself.
rebirth is a better.
It's kind of complicated.
His third form.
Yeah.
This is his third form. He calls himself Spark at this point. He's dropped the Guilty Spark in the 343 from his name. So, this is when Renegades picks up. So in 2557, the Ace of Spades recovers 343 Guilty Spark, and he convinces them to help him find the librarian. In exchange, he will help Ryan find her father, Sergeant Forge. That is a plot from Halo Wars 1, Sergeant Forge. So, they go on kind of this crazy magical adventure where they, of course, go to the S.H.I.E.L.D. world where Halo Wars took place. They're looking for Ryan's father. They find a little bit. They do all this crazy Forerunner stuff. Of course, at the very end of the book, they end up on Earth. They are hunted by Oni because Oni knows they have Guilty Spark at this point, or just Spark. And Oni is not happy. They're like, they have a Forerunner AI, and that is not good in our books.
Yeah.
So they're running. Throughout their journey, Guilty Spark and Rubicon and all of these different Forerunner artifacts have kind of led them to Earth to find a personality imprint of a librarian. The librarian is super impressed with Guilty Spark. She's just like, wow, I didn't expect you to get this far. But Guilty Spark has kind of came over the guillotine and the destiny set by him from the librarian and has grown to become his own being. At this point, we find out that Spark really, the only thing he wants to do is kind of be at peace with his friends, Riser and Venivra. We haven't talked about Venivra, but she came in during their journey on Installation 07. The librarian assures him that his friends are at peace, and he can either return to the domain and go with her to the Absolute Record, or stay with the Ace of Spades crew. And then, of course, at this point, Guilty Spark realizes that it's not about the journey, it's about the friends you make along the way. And he stays with the crew of the Ace of Spades. But this is not the end of his story. This is going into Point of Light, so if you have not read Point of Light, this is probably the most recent Halo book that's come out. So it is the most recent book that's come out. So this is major spoilers for that. So the Ace of Spades has continued to look for Ryan Forge's father for quite some time at this point. After 6 months, Guilty Spark says, hey, we had a deal, Ryan. You said that we would continue looking for your father and Spirit of Fire. And I need to figure out what this key that the librarian imprint has given me. So, Ryan's not too happy about it, but she's like, a deal's a deal. We're gonna go figure out where this key leads. And boy, does this key lead places. The first place it leads them is Installation 07. Right back to where it kind of has all begun for poor Chakas and 343 Guilty Spark. Of course, Installation 07 is not the best place for Spark. He is not very happy to be there. He is remembering all this fucked up shit that's happened on Installation 07. And, it's not a good place for him. So he's remembering all this. He's remembering those who had suffered and died, and just all of the stuff that had happened. So they end up finding where the key goes in Installation 07. It leads them to another planet, which, after quite a delay, Guilty Spark ends up there, and Ryan is already there because Guilty Spark just lets Ryan be consumed by the slip space portal that just happens to open when the key is activated. But at the end of their journey, after going through many planets, many trials and tribulations with the crew of the Ace of Spades, Guilty Spark and Ryan are able to figure out exactly where the key leads. And the key leads to a place called Bastion. And if you are not familiar with Bastion, you may remember it being mentioned a couple times in Halo 5. That's the first time it was really talked about. So, Bastion is a Forerunner replica of Earth made by the librarian for an unknown purpose. Kind of her lab, kind of a weird experiment. We're not exactly sure why she built it other than just a weird pet project or something like that, but its true purpose is really yet to be revealed. So, and of course, Bastion needs a new caretaker. And they ask Spark, the monitors of Bastion ask Spark to become the monitor of Bastion. Of course, this is almost the perfect place for Guilty Spark because Guilty Spark is not quite Forerunner, not quite human, and Bastion is not quite Earth and not quite a Forerunner planet. It's almost a perfect place for Guilty Spark to be, unfortunately. So, unfortunately, Guilty Spark has to leave. He has to stay with Bastion, and because of the Guardian Uprising, Bastion has to be moved to an unknown location. After all they've been through, Ryan and Guilty Spark say a very heartfelt goodbye to each other, and Guilty Spark heads off into places unknown.
No.
Which completely takes him out of the running to be in Halo Infinite, so it's not happening. And that's the long and the very short of what kind of Guilty Spark's character, Spark, Chakas, and Guilty Spark are. He has probably one of the most great redemption arcs, he has a great origin, there's just so much to this character. And outside of what happens in the games.
Definitely like the longest character arc in any show in any series. Yeah, there's no way there's another series out there.
This guy has like 4 books and 3 games.
Spanning hundreds and thousands of years, like crazy.
Why?
5 books. Yeah, the Forerunner trilogy and then Renegades and
I guess he's in the last Forerunner book a little bit.
Yeah, and you could even say that he's kind of in Hunters of the Dark a little bit, because I think they mentioned the Rubicon.
Well, he's definitely in the Flood
really
as well. He's in the Flood too, so 6 books.
True.
So, but yes, very, very much, like, long-spanning character, and just, like, his story just continues and continues, and we got to know who he is, where he came from, and then got to get more story from kind of after the kind of major events. But he's also in like the terminals, and he's kind of like the pseudo main character as he kind of tells the additional stories through the different terminals in the anniversary games. So yeah, Spark's very influential and prominent character in the Halo series, and so it's amazing like how much influence he has.
And he's so important in the first 3 games because he's basically the link to Forerunners. He's that expository character that at least gives you some hints on what the Forerunners were and what the hell's going on. You need a character like that to really guide you through what you're supposed to be doing. And of course, he's just fucking sassy as hell. This guy's so goddamn sassy.
He really does have a great personality.
It's so good. Throughout the games, the books definitely do his personality justice. He's an interesting character with a great personality and he's just a fun character. He's really fun, which is one of the reasons why I like him so much. I think if you just play the first 3 Halo games, you don't really understand why so many people really, really love this character. I think it's one of those things that you have to experience the extended lore to really understand who this character is and why people love him so much. Also, I definitely have a bone to pick with Kelly Gay because now Guilty Spark's off the table. Completely off the table for Infinite, and I'm so upset and sad. That was my dream. It would be like Guilty Spark in Chief, like broing it up on Installation 07.
People would have been scratching their heads if they were playing Infinite and all of a sudden 343 appeared.
It's fucking
John would have been like, wait, didn't I laser your face off when you lasered Johnson?
That's true. There's probably a lot of gamers who wouldn't recognize him if he came back in the game because they would have seen him in Halo 3.
I'm wondering how public knowledge it is that Guilty Spark did survive that. I'm wondering if that's because it's obviously public knowledge to anyone who has any inkling about the extended lore of Halo, but I'm wondering how if that's actually carried on to non-lore people in the Halo community. Because some of the extended lore has become kind of just common knowledge for all of the Halo people, and I'm wondering if that's one of the bits. But either way, definitely not throwing it up on Halo in Halo Infinite, which is just so sad.
Yeah. It would have been cool to see him show up as an armiger and like be on your side and stuff. That'd be pretty cool.
It'd be so cool. Or at least to just be your Cortana for a little bit, maybe. I don't know.
Oh man, could you imagine how weird that would be?
It'd be so weird, but I would love to have him in my head narrating the stuff I do.
Oh man, John would.
But
not
maybe
like
that's
that.
just me.
Be like, you fucking killed Johnson, you dick.
I mean, that wasn't technically him. That was like protocol crazy, you know.
I don't know.
No, man, he killed Johnson.
Ah, shit. But he has such a great redemption arc. Don't forget the redemption arc.
Uh-huh. John wouldn't be aware of any of that, though.
Redemption.
Okay, sorry. My bad.
Yeah, I hope I summarized that enough. There was a lot to get through, and I didn't want to...
There really was. I mean, we could have, gone into the thick of it all, but I mean, as in terms of a highlight and a general sort of tale, I mean, I think you did a pretty good job, and it hits all the major points, and yeah, if anyone who hasn't read any of these books but kind of generally knows the story, highly, highly, highly recommend Renegades and Point of Light. And then if you just want to know where this guy came from, as well as just general Forerunner Foundation and just early prehistory, like the Forerunner sagas, of course, like that's what it was written for. So so much good content out there that 343 is a part of.
Yeah, and then go listen to our Kelly Gay interviews, because those are really fucking cool, where she talks about
that
like
too. We got 2 of
bringing
them.
Spark back into the lore. That reveal, that was a big deal back in what am I trying to say?
2017?
Yeah, fuck.
So good. God, I remember reading that, and I'm just like, oh my god. Instantly, I'm like, this is my new favorite book.
I was like on Reddit, and like there were posts that were like, you know which part this is, or so to speak, or like you'll know when you read it, like shocking
Yeah, you know
moment
when you
from
get
Renegades. And then I go into our chat, and I was like, guys, apparently there's like a shocking moment in Renegades, and then we're like, yes, everyone read it. We need to talk about it. Have you read it yet? You'll know it when you know it.
It was a really good moment for just Halo lore in general. I love moments like that when kind of everyone realizes something huge at the same time, and everyone's like, oh shit, let's talk about it.
Yeah, no, totally. It was definitely... I mean, we even got a little bit of that with Point of Light as well, in terms of Bastion and Eden and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, it was
cool
great to get so many
things.
questions answered, and then have him like, yeah, it's a nice exit for him. Like, you could totally just leave him there if they never want. You can kind of like easily never go back, but obviously we want to, because
Yeah, I think it's definitely, like I kind of said, it's a good place for Guilty Spark to end up, because it's a place that actually feels appropriate for his character, because his character really doesn't belong with humanity. And his character really doesn't belong just at an installation, a regular installation, doing regular, like, Forerunner or Monitor stuff. So, as sad as it is, it does seem like a weird Forerunner Earth does seem like the best place for him to be hanging out.
true. I don't think he's by himself either, is he? He's got like those other.
There's some other monitors
Yeah.
there that were part of the Audacity on the Librarian ship. So they're more like memory imprints rather than being like actual people, but they didn't actually go to the surface in the book at all, so we don't even know if maybe there's like, I don't know, animals or something, or humanity, like another librarian like sect of humanity down there or something like that. So we don't really know what's on the surface. There's this huge like orbital ring around Bastion, and that's kind of where they sat. They didn't actually go to the surface of the planet at all. Do we have any other closing statements?
No, not particularly.
He's pretty crazy. He's a great character. I like what they did with it. It's just so unnecessary, but it was like, wow, okay. Took me for a ride there.
They went above and
definitely.
beyond for him.
Okay, Krista, thank you very much for that. Everyone else, this is pretty much it. We're going to sign ourselves off, so thank you very much for joining us. Like mentioned at the top of the show, you can find every episode to all of our shows on our website, hellopodcastevolve.com. You can search for their unique podcast feed too, should you so choose. If you want to listen to everything all in one feed, there is a main feed, obviously with Halo Podcast Evolved, with everything on it. You can find us on any podcast service of your choice. Once again, special shout out to all our patrons. Thank you very much for supporting us and this show. That's patreon.com/Halo Podcast Evolved. And finally, we do have a voicemail service. Should you choose to use it, you can. It is 205 Evolved. That's 205-386-5833. And you can leave us anything Halo related on that as well. And with that, I have been your host today, David. And until next time, evolve.
Evolved.
Evolve.